Thanks a lot, Professor Msila. First of all, I think we should apologize for our late start. And the reason for that is the South African Police Service are always concerned about matters of safety and security which affect all of us. That's why they then set up these things to check what we are carrying. Someone like me, I've got to go through to make sure that I'm not carrying a gun or a knife or something. That's what delays our start. The Vice Chancellor was saying to me that we make a small mistake with regard to these sessions, that we don't alert people on time that they should come an hour early, because they are going to be delayed necessarily because of the checkup. As a consequence of which, people arrive 10 minutes before time and then will then spend 20 minutes in the queue. I want to apologize for that. It really was because of the security measures which the police service undertake. That necessarily means we will cut the time for the question and answer session. Necessarily. I must thank the panelists and Professor Msila for these difficult questions they have posed, all of which they relate basically to our continent, all of them. You know, as the first modern African intellectuals, modern ones, emerged in the 19th century, they took up this matter about the future of all Africans on the continent and the African diaspora. I'm mentioning that to say that therefore many of us, I see all sorts of people like with gray hair like Machila and others. As we grew up within this context that our people from, as I say, from the 19th century onwards have always had a Pan-African perspective. So it's a preoccupation not only about South Africa, but all Africans on the continent and elsewhere. So I'm mentioning that I think we should bear this in mind, that historically this has been the position in our country, that even the liberation movement, historically, the liberation movement has been Pan-Africanist in outlook. It could not but be Pan-Africanist in outlook. That's where we come from. You remember even when the African priests broke away to form their own Christian churches in the 19th century. They called it the Ethiopian Church. It was again within this context of, as these Africans in South Africa, we already always had this perspective that our future of South Africa was intimately tied up with the future of the rest of the continent as well as the African diaspora. I'm mentioning that in connection with the issue that Omulemu raised about the world order and Africa's role in that context. the role of South Africa, the role of the African Union, and so on. To start off by saying, and part of what's happened, I'm sure that the students here would have observed what I'm about to say, which is this, that over the last few years, as a country, we have walked away from the Africa agenda. That's a reality. Over the years, the focus on the continent and the placement of South Africa within that context has diminished. I know this also because when I go around the African continent, other Africans raise this question. What has happened to South Africa? Why are you walking away from the rest of us? That's part of our reality. So the question that Umulemu is raising, what does South Africa do in terms of responding to this world order that is emerging? In a sense, it's an unfair question. Because, as I've said, as a country, we've been walking away even from focus on these Africa questions. Never mind the rest of the world. I think the students also at this university of this African school would also have noticed another phenomenon, which is that the spirit of Pan-Africanism on the continent has also been retreating. You see it everywhere. Not only in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world, elsewhere on our continent. That spirit of Pan-Africanism is also diminishing. And in a sense, one can understand it. Each one of our countries individually gets preoccupied with only its own domestic challenges. What happens to the rest of the continent, what happens to this Pan-African perspective, recedes. So, Omulemu, you are quite correct. There's something that is happening in the rest of the world which signifies a changing world order. At the beginning of this year, the Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, gave an interview, an interesting interview, in which he said there was a particular period when you had a unipolar world in which United States was a dominant pole, a unipolar world. And he said that period was an aberration. When I read that thing, I stood up and gave Marco Rubio a standing ovation. That you'd get a leader of the United States to say, the unipolar world is, let's not go back there. A world dominated by the United States. And then he went on to say, what is normal is the practice of multipolarity. Again, I gave another standing ovation. That the United States would take a position of that kind. And then he said, in the context of that multipolarity, each of the countries of the world pursues its own interests, does whatever in the rest of the world in pursuit of its own interests. And he said, I remember he mentioned Chile. He said Chile pursues its own interests, as does China, as does Russia. And he said, within that multipolar world, therefore, the United States will pursue its own interests. That's when I sat down. I didn't give that a standing ovation. Because it was signaling something about what was going to happen. Since everybody in the world pursues their own interests, why should the United States not pursue its own interests? I thought what was missing in what actually had been a correct position taken by Secretary of State Rubio was to say, we pursue, each one of those countries pursues our own interest within the context of a particular global setting. That all of us, for instance, are bound by what is in the UN Charter. Yes, indeed, we might very well pursue that our own interests as countries, but there's a global context that was missing. It explains the way that the United States has acted. Consistent with that position, therefore, we will, like all other countries, pursue our own interests. That is why then you've had this demand, very visible, very loud, very correct, insisting on these three things: multipolarity, multilateralism, and respect for the UN Charter. You've had this demand made. This is part of this formation of this world order. That yes, indeed, as each one of our countries must pursue these interests, at least let's be guided by these three things: respect for multipolarity, multilateralism, particularly exercised through the United Nations, and respect for the UN Charter when we talk about international law. There's clearly a battle that is going on in the world around these issues. That's why even the mention about this celebration in China, now last week, of the defeat of the Japanese aggression during the Second World War, the 80th anniversary, and what happened in Beijing to celebrate that. Again, people watch the pictures. Did you see that picture with Xi Jinping and then Putin and Kim Jong-un? It's part of this discussion. It signifies something. Or a bit earlier, when the Shanghai Cooperation Organization met, again they would say, did you see that picture? Xi Jinping, Putin, and the Prime Minister of India. The situation, Omlema would say, with regard to Africa, South Africa, the AU, with regard to what interventions do we make in order to make sure that that emerging global international order addresses the African interests. I can tell you what I think we should do. But I think looking at the objective reality in this country, on our continent, I think we are at our weakest in terms of making this kind of intervention. The sense of cohesion that you need, for instance, on the African continent to say, if you said, let the Africans come together and say to them, in this discussion about multilateralism, where do we stand? I think you would find countries moving in different directions. I've told the story before, maybe even here, that some years back I visited one of the African countries. I was still president then. And then when I was leaving, I was accompanied in the car by one of the ministers. So we're chatting away there in the car and so on. And then he gave me his business card and said, President, next time you come to visit us, I would like you to contact me so that we can continue this very interesting discussion we're having among ourselves, between the two of us. So this is my business card with my contact details. So I took the card, put it in my pocket, and off we went. And as we were flying, I took the card out and looked at it. On one side, it had his name, the minister, and contact details, telephone number, and all of that. And I looked the other side of the card. It had the same details. Name, minister, contact details in Paris. On this side of the card are the contact details in his own home in Africa. On the other side are his contact details in Paris. So, and the man was not ashamed to give me a card like that. But I'm trying to say that sense of cohesion among our continent, which would enable us to intervene in the making of this new world order, I think it's not there. And I think an unfortunate part of that is, as I was saying earlier, as a country, we've walked away from the Africa agenda ourselves.
This new world order thing, hey guys, I don't know, man. But anyway, but I don't, if I was to be asked, I don't think I'm for it, man. I don't want to lie to you. Because it comes with some things that I don't think we will agree with as humans, you know. And unfortunately, if it's one world order, that means the order comes from the world which puts everyone in that bucket, and then they tell us what to do. It's sort of like it's going to be sort of like a dictator, sort of like a thing, you know. That means whatever they say, it goes. If they say jump, you have to jump, because it's one word order. That means the order will come from one structure. And I'm asking myself, how is that going to be if the other country does not agree with it, and if the other citizens of the other country, they don't agree? What is going to happen? In other words, they will force things on us. I'm just saying.
So the capacity to intervene with the rest of the continent to answer the question that Omulemu we are raising, capacity isn't there from here. To say, let us get together as Africans.
And I'm asking myself, guys, you remember Mr. Malema when he was doing his speech in Nigeria, he did talked about one Africa, right? And I think that one I can go for, because it's Africa. And I don't know though if also, guys, the thing is, even if something can sound good in front of you when people are saying it, I can tell you it's not that going to be that good. It is just like the African thing. If Africans come together, they say one Africa, one president in Africa. If that president decides to say Christianity out, Muslim out, what out, all these things, and then we are remaining as African religion, which is going to be African spirituality, according to Pan-Africanism, whatever it is, African spirituality, so what? So in other words, other people like, it's just a mess for me. I don't know, but I'm not like, if they can give me a structure of it on how it's going to be, maybe, maybe a glimpse on what would happen when the decision are made, what is going to happen. I'm just not for these things, guys. I don't know nothing.
And play the role that we need to play in this emerging new world order. What is to be done about that? I'm saying I can tell you what I think. But I think objectively it might be entirely irrelevant. Because I think we need to do something else first. To reinstitute, for instance, the Africa agenda here in South Africa. To re-engage the African continent about itself.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Before we begin to answer the question, what do we do about the rest of the world? And those I think should be our starting points.
Those are actually, it's a good point, right? It's a very, very good point. But we all know that the West, the rest of the world, which is the West in most cases, usually they like to impose things, And while we are busy there building one Africa, number one, I don't think they will agree with that. Meaning, they might actually want to take it down or want to mess it up or want to do whatever, because I don't think they will like that. Just like now, Africa is not together, but I can tell you, they are just taking that country. That's why if it's one Africa, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually decide for another country to say we are bringing 1, 2, 3, that country, we are bringing our resources, we want to invest, they want to take resources. They will not agree with that, Africans, okay? And it's going to be problems. But I can tell you, if they see that Africa is coming together, right? They will fight it. They will fight it. One way or another, they will fight it. And unfortunately, some of African presidents, they might actually succumb to whatever that they will be trying to do to them. Either they will promise them things or they will do whatever. All right. But I can tell you right now, I don't think it will be an easy thing to do in Africa, not based on Africans, not maybe liking each other, not based maybe on Africans maybe struggling to come together, based on the West or the other side of the world, allowing it, meaning just saying, okay, guys, we can just come together. It's fine. We'll leave you with your resources. We'll and then you come together. I don't think it will be that easy. It's a good idea. It seems good, but in reality, in real life, I can tell you, and it's not possible because Africans, because of us. It would be very difficult because the West might want to, mix up things and promise others, and then they will be pulling out on the other side. It's gonna be a whack and a half. I can tell you right now. It's not gonna be. I don't know if it happens, when it will happen, if it can happen. When will it be happen? But as we speak, nah. And I am under the impression that thing that is talking about your world order, whatever, I don't like that thing. To be honest with you, I don't like it. I don't want to see it. I wish it doesn't actually come, but it seems like it's gonna come. Okay. Now, one thing I know is that one, it might be the first one that stands. They might come together before even Africa can come together. And I can understand Mr. Mbeki when he says, if we can start here and start be us and just have one Africa. But it seems like we will be beaten to it. And while we're trying to come together, other presidents in Africa, they would have been taken. Meaning, they would have been promised things, and it's gonna be difficult for you to persuade them to join the One Africa. It's a pity because with this thing of One Africa, it's only there and there people who are speaking about it. Mr. Malema speaks about it. Mr. Mbeki speaks about it, and just few there and there. Some presidents they do. I think the one in Kenya, I don't know. I think it does speak about it. I don't know whether he's for it or, but anyway.
The question that, Rachel, you are raising about the Congo is related to the same issue. You know, the conflict in the Congo, I'm talking now particularly about the Eastern Congo, that conflict has been going on now for a number of years. Very difficult to resolve this issue. You are right, I saw that recently there's been some controversy because the Thabo Mbeki Foundation held we now have an annual session on this question of peace and security on the continent. It was the second session now, last week, focused on the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, the Congo, and Southern Africa, particularly focusing on Mozambique. I'm saying that I've seen questions being raised about the presence of a delegation from the M23 in the Congo. It puzzled me that the question arose at all. Because you can't discuss peace and security in the Congo without involving the M23. Otherwise you are joking. That is why you have a process taking place in Doha, in Qatar, where the government of the Congo and the M23 are meeting. Necessarily it's correct. And before that, the president of Angola, the current chairperson of the African Union, had chaired a process, exactly the same process, of a dialogue between the government of the Congo and the M23 in order to find peace in the Congo. I think the Thabo Mbeki Foundation had been very, very foolish if it had invited all these Congolese to say, let's talk about peace and security in the Congo, but you M23 stay away. It doesn't make sense. It would never make sense. Because even to understand the phenomenon of the M23, where does this thing come from? It's very, very fundamental to understand that, because that helps you to understand the Congo. If you don't understand the origins of the M23 and what it stands for, then you will not understand the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'm saying that as a foundation, we thought that let us discuss the matter of the DRC, because clearly this is one of the major areas in terms of peace and security on the continent. And let everybody come. The consequence of which, not only did they have the M23 there, you had representatives of the governing party. President Tshisekedi's party representatives were there. And quite correctly, they never questioned the presence of the M23.
Okay, what is M23? M23 refers to a prominent rebel group in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which has been engaged in a conflict with the DRC government and other armed groups for years. The M23, supported by Rwanda, fights for control over DRC. What? You gotta be kidding me. Over the DRC resource-rich state terrorists, contributing to significant civilian suffering. You see, guys, that is why it's gonna be very difficult. Already, people, they're just fighting for resources. They're not fighting for whatever. Resources. Resources. You've got the West wanting our resources in Africa, other African countries, they are fighting for the resources also. And then you are telling me that Africa can come together, and the West is very happy when these things are happening. I'm just saying, man. That's what M23, it's like a group that has been established to fight against another government for resources.
They are Congolese. They all know the nature of the challenge in the Congo. So I'm saying President Tshisekedi's party, the UDPS, had its representatives there, and they addressed the meeting, made their own proposals as to what is to be done. The M23, the Alliance of the Congo River, the AFC, were also there. They addressed the meeting and said, this is what we think about the Congo. And I think I can say this, that in the end, we had a meeting with all of these delegations. And the very, very interesting thing was this. There was a unanimous view, from the governing party to the M23 and others in between. All of them saying, it's very clear to us as the Congolese that we need a national dialogue. We need to get together as the Congolese and say, what do we do about the Congo? That is a unanimous view. That includes the M23. I'm saying it includes the governing party of the Congo of President Tshisekedi. And hopefully that will happen. That the Congolese will again, they call it the Sun City number 2. They say, President, we met here at Sun City to talk about the future of the Congo and agreed, all of us. And as a consequence of which we took the agreement at Sun City and drafted a constitution on which all of us agreed. The problem, they say, is that in the implementation of the Sun City agreement, we didn't implement various elements of that agreement. That's why we have a crisis today. We need another Sun City number 2 so that we as Congolese can then talk together and say, what do we do about our country? I'm saying, Rachel, you could never talk about peace and security in the Congo and exclude the M23. If you did that, it would mean you have not understood the nature of the challenge of peace and security in the Congo. We were doing nothing else different from what President of Angola did and what the Rwandans, the Qataris are doing in terms of putting together a grouping of this kind. The matter of peace and security on the continent, more broadly, I think is very related to the issue I was talking about earlier, of this retreat of the Pan-African spirit on the continent. I think this broader question about peace and security on the continent relates to that. You know what happens normally? A conflict breaks out somewhere. Then we intervene and say, stop the guns, silence the guns. These guns are then silenced. The belligerents then talk to each other. We produce a new constitution, hold elections. We have an interim government, hold elections on the basis of the new constitution, and that's peace. So it normally happens. And what's missing in that process is an intervention to address the root causes of the conflict. So it's necessary to silence the guns. And so it's necessary to find a formula so that people can govern their country. But of critical importance is this question. What is it that led to this conflict? We have to address that so that it does not arise again. And indeed, this was one of the hot issues as we're discussing now, peace and security with regard to Mozambique. What is happening in Cabo Delgado? Who are these people? What do they stand for? Whom do they represent? What do they want? Because you need to understand that not only to say silence the guns, but in order to address the issue which gave birth to that grouping so that it does not arise again. I'm saying the challenge about that is the politics of the continent. It becomes difficult to get to this matter of the root causes in the absence of a Pan-African outlook. You can't do it in the absence of that Pan-African outlook. If, for instance, at the root of the conflict might be, for instance, issues of ethnic power. To say this particular grouping is too dominant, and therefore there's maldistribution of resources and all that. And therefore to get to the root causes, we must look at this matter. For instance, it's called unity in diversity. How do we address this unity in diversity? Address both issues at the same time. It's a very political question. It's not mechanical. And I'm saying that it needs a political base from which you are able to arrive at a situation like that. If you don't have it, you will avoid addressing these fundamental questions. And I'm saying that on the continent, this is part of our problem. That weakness of a Pan-African perspective, it impacts negatively on the capacity of the continent to deal with these problems of peace and security. So that's one of the matters that we need to address. And indeed, I think that the more the continent would succeed in kind of developing this cohesion within itself and about its own future, the easier it would be to address the matter about the brain drain. Many years ago, I visited the United States. Our then ambassador says to me, President, there's a group of Africans here who want to see you. So I saw them. This is a group of Africans. It was a very interesting group. All of them had PhDs. All of them. And all of them had got those PhDs in what the Americans call the Ivy League universities. And all of them were under 40. And this was executive of that organization. That organized themselves across the United States as Africans. All of them PhDs, all of them from these universities. And this is the executive committee that I met in Washington. So they say to me, President, this is who we are. This is this body. So I protested. Professor Msila to them immediately. Because I said, you see, the way you people have constituted yourselves, it means I can't belong. I was excluded. But these Africans were saying, the President, we're qualified as we are, we're working in the US, but we remain African. Let's look for a mechanism whereby we'll spend some of our time here in the US and spend time in Africa. so that our capacities make an impact on the development of our continent. We agreed on the matter with them, and actually NEPAD then ran a program, because they've got qualifications in all sorts of things, mathematics and this and that and the other, to talk around the continent to say, during the 3 months of the year, we can bring so-and-so to come and work in this sector. Matter was agreed, it became program of NEPAD. It's disappeared. Again, for the same reason I was indicating earlier, the capacity on the continent has weakened. I'm absolutely certain that up to today, there's that willingness among these Africans who are in the diaspora like that, these ones who are represented as being part of the brain drain. I'm absolutely certain that if the continent reached out to them to say, look, you can see where the continent is moving this way, they would repeat the same thing. We may not return from the United States, but we're ready to spend months on our continent to give necessary contribution. It's possible to deal with the matter of the brain drain, but the challenge starts here. It does not start in America, it starts here. To get the continent right so that we can then do the right thing. And I think that you are quite correct, as a party, about the existence of many policies on the African continent with regard to the youth. There's no shortage of policies, even at the continental level, on the issue of youth challenge and youth development. Again, you'll come back to this problem. The right policy positions have been taken, they exist. The will to implement is not there. With regard to a whole range of issues on the African continent, it's the absence of the will to do the right things, which have been agreed already. Issues of youth development, for instance. So I would really be very, very happy, Professor Msila, if your school can then say you are answering the questions that arise from all of this. What then do we do? Me having said this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, we can't stop there. What we have to say, what is it then that we do in order to get things right? And this African school, that is its task. And I really hope that we would focus on the matter like that. Because just to end on this point, I'm told that even some members of the diplomatic corps here in the last few weeks have met informally and raised the same question. To say, why doesn't this school serve as a center in terms of other African academic institutions to answer these questions? Why don't we do that? I think it's a challenge that faces all of us. And so there's none of us, I can see here, a number of our former ambassadors, Kingsley Makubela is sitting here, and others I've mentioned, another one with gray hair. Even highly educated here like Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. A lot of capacity there is to answer these questions. Because I'm saying we should not only say this is what is wrong, we must also say what is to be done. And the school must do that. I think I've answered all of these questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just before we continue with the questions, I would like to relay the message from the panelists who said to me that I should relay the message that they are so thankful to be part of this panel today, and I should give their thanks to the VC and His Excellency, the President, our Dean, Professor Paswana, as well as the Council. So thank you on behalf of the panelists. Mr. President, also thank you for the homework that you have given us as a school, that we need to look at some of the questions that you raised. I think we'll take that as a challenge as a school. I'm sure our team is ready to take up the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, now the session that we're getting into will be to ask you as the audience some questions. And for the first round, I'll take only 6 questions, 2 from this side, 2 from this side, and 2 from that end. Please, when you ask a question, don't start by giving a speech. Just get on to the question immediately. Because sometimes you'll find that we get carried away by wanting to talk about 15 minutes before asking the question. Okay, just be direct and ask the question. We'll have the first one here. We'll have another one there, the cap. We'll have one there, green jersey. We'll have the one there. We'll have one there, in that order. We'll come back. We'll come back.
Okay. No, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mduduzi Michael Majola, and I would like to pose a question to the former state president. It has to do with the national dialogue. We've noted that his foundation, along with other 6 legacy organizations, withdrew from the national dialogue's preparatory, citing concerns over rushed timelines and reduced citizens' role, feeling the process meaning the government wants to take influence in that process. What are your views on the national dialogue's current trajectory, and how do we believe it can be made more inclusive and effective in addressing South Africa's challenges? And the other question, quick one, President, is going to speak about Donald Trump, the U.S. president. How do you assess Donald Trump's comments and policies regarding the white farmers, including the proposed tariff that is going to be imposed with South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. That is the first question. Panelists, can you are released. Thanks. Okay, that is the first question. The second question? It was somewhere. Oh, okay. Panelists?
Thank you, Program Director. Also a question to former President Mbeki. To say when you were president, and maybe even now, because I'm sure you interact with your counterparts, was there a program to align the continent politically, legally? Because for us to become a seamless continent like Europe, we have to align politically. Some of our laws must be aligned. Has there been a homework to look at that? Or is it some of the masters and PhDs that will come out of the school? To align education systems, to align infrastructure planning, town planning, all of these things, because Up until we get to those granular activities, everything else becomes very high level and textbook. Thanks.
Thank you. The third question, where is the, there? In that order, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Thabo Mbeki. Mr. President, my question relates to the United States of America. In terms of the United States of America deploying its military to the Caribbean Sea, how do you assess that threat to Venezuela? What do you make of it? And secondly, in terms of the United States, or rather, let me say, the recent attack of Israel to Qatar, do you really believe that the United States was unaware of the attack before it actually took place? Thank you.
Thank you. The next one. In that order. We can hear.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Togolo Janki. Mr. President, my question relates to the relationship that South Africa has with Iran. And the reason why I asked this question is because in 2015, a series of documents were leaked to the news media. They came to be known as the spy cables. There was one document in particular in those documents called Operational Target Analysis, and in that document it went into the details of the relationship that South Africa has with Iran with regards to its nuclear program and how South Africa could help or has been helping them with that regard. And in the executive order that the United States issued against South Africa, it also mentioned this relationship with Iran, and also recently an SANDF general went to Iran in secret and it became a thing in the media. My question then becomes, what is the nature of this relationship that we have with Iran, and then what does it have to do with the contention and issues that we've been having with the United States?
Thank you. The next one here.
Afternoon, everyone, and afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Promise. So I want to go back to the question of the Congo. It's very important to me and to everyone here. I just came back from the Congo. I just came back from the Kivu. I've been in the Kivu for many years, 4 years of my life. I served in the Kivu. I've served in Sudan, fought against the Janjaweed, M23, ADF, you can name it. So now, on the question of M23, and then inviting them here, I nearly cried. I just want to state that. It was so painful, but it was relevant, as you said. Now, I want us to go back on the question of Rwandan refugee. The question here that we need to go deep into is the Rwandan refugees and the Ugandan refugees who ran away from the two dictators, who is Museveni and Kagame, who ran into Congo. That's where the root cause is. But now, always when we address this question, we are talking about M23. Remember the Rwandan refugee, or the question of M23 started because President of Rwanda was killed. Now, the Rwandan refugees ran to Congo. After they ran to Congo, and now they want to go back to Rwanda. Now, Mr. President, I want to ask you, if you call M23 and you call the Chilombo government and you call the government of Rwanda to come and discuss, and you call Nanga for the Congo River Alliance to come to the foundation and discuss, why are you leaving the ADF, who are the refugees of Uganda, who ran away from Museveni and who are causing trouble in the Congo, in the area of Beni and Uvira province? Now, why are you leaving the FDLR, who are Rwandan refugees, why are you leaving them in the dialogue? Because here the problem is Rwanda is coming into Congo they say they want to fight the FDLR. Why are they being left out? Who is listening to the Hutu tribe? Nobody's listening to
yes,
the Hutu.
that's a very clear question. Let's get the last one for this round.
Sanbonani Dumela, to our President and the panelists and every dignitary who is here, I'd like to greet you all. Umuzi wa Dlamini lo khulumayo. And I would like to pose a question to our former president. On a lighter note, Mr. President, can you please be part of our board? We definitely, as the youth of South Africa, need the wisdom that you carry. And as our elder, we would benefit highly, even if it's just one of you duplicated into 1 million serving in our boards, we would definitely exceed our expectations. Now, to my question, is to the University of South Africa and to our former president. This is regarding people living with disability. Studies have shown that it's 1/5 of the world's population lives with some disability. And what is, if that's the case, what is the university therefore implementing to aid this, to aid them financially, to aid them in their livelihoods, as some are trapped in the townships, in the rural areas, and where they are destitute and we cannot reach them? So how are we as a people dealing with the very least of us in their challenges and their endeavors? Foremost in the financial services sector as one of the most prominent in the country.
Thank you. That is our first round, and it was very male-centric. We'll see the second round. Yes, we have the last one. Okay.
Professor Msila says there's a second round coming, which means that I must be short in my answers, otherwise there won't be time. Muzi, with regard to your request about the board, agreed. They contact me, I'm happy to serve on the board. On the matter of how the university is treating with the important issue of people with disability, fortunately, Vice Chancellor is sitting next to me there. She must answer that question. It's an important question, I agree. It needs her to answer it. When we were in government, we thought this was one of the matters which needed really close attention. We had resisted the idea of the formation of a ministry dealing with women, youth, people with disability. And the reason we're resisting the idea of a ministry, we're saying that those issues belong to the President of the Republic, not particular ministers. So right at the top, because it's a cross-cutting issue, it must impact on every element of government. So you can't allocate it to a ministry. That's the position we took. And as a result, the government had, I don't know what the situation is now, the government had a very comprehensive policy on how to deal with the disability issue. So that indeed, even I remember that the World Bank poached one of our senior officials to deal with the disability issue in Washington. So I'm sure there was a setting within which our universities could deal with the matter of disability. What UNISA is doing particularly about this matter, I really don't know. But the Vice Chancellor, fortunately, is here. She can answer that question. With regard to the Congo, As I was indicating, we brought the Congolese together to say, let's talk about the future of the Congo. And indeed they came, and they, as I say, in all the elements that came, and we discussed that, and they came to a unanimous view as to what they thought needed to be done. The issue that is being raised, like for instance about the people who committed genocide in Rwanda in 1994 and then went into the Eastern Congo, who now became what is called the FDLR. The question that is being raised is important. What are we doing about those people? In 2001, 2002, after we had concluded the negotiations among the Congolese had concluded the negotiations among themselves in what was called Sun City, it was clear to us that there was another element that needed to be addressed, which was the question of the relations particularly between Rwanda and the DRC. As a consequence of which, we convened a process between the two governments to look at the matter of the relations between the two of them, which would include this matter of the people who had fled from Rwanda into the Eastern Congo. As a consequence of which, there was an agreement signed between the DRC and Rwanda, signed by both presidents, Joseph Kabila and Paul Kagame. I recall that even Kofi Annan, who was Secretary General of the UN, insisted that he wanted to be one of the observers to that agreement. So that agreement is signed by President Kagame, President Joseph Kabila. Witnesses, Kofi Annan, myself. And part of that, so the Americans are saying that the agreement that was signed now in Washington between the two countries by the foreign ministers of the two countries is the first such agreement. That's not correct. First agreement was signed here in Pretoria, 2002, signed by the presidents. One of the clauses in that agreement, I'm sure it appears again in this agreement in the United States, was that it would be important for the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to disarm the FDLR. If they want to stay in the Congo, to disarm them, they can stay as refugees. Otherwise, to resist, to assist in the process of their return to Rwanda as ordinary civilians, not armed groups. Attached to that was then the withdrawal of the Rwandan troops that were in the Congo because of the presence of the FDLR. I'm sure if you look at the agreement that was signed in Washington now, it will say the same thing. That agreement didn't work, collapsed. The reason it collapsed is because the government of the Congo did not have the capacity to disarm the FDLR. They could not implement the agreement. So I'm saying that agreement collapsed. I don't know how the situation has changed now, because I'm quite sure the agreement in the United States will have the same provision. It's the responsibility of the government of the Congo not to allow foreigners to form armies on the territory of the Congo. And therefore, this FDLR must be disarmed, and indeed can go back home to Rwanda, but the government of Rwanda must make sure it accepts these Rwandan citizens. Whether that will actually happen at now, I don't know. So that is how we're dealing with the matter of the FDLR. we couldn't insert them into a meeting where the Congolese are meeting, deciding the future of the Congo among themselves. They are not Congolese. These are Rwandans. And so I'm saying we're dealing with them in a different way, within the context of a bilateral agreement between the governments of the Congo and Rwanda. And fortunately, you've had a new agreement between the governments of Rwanda and the Congo. It has a provision for how to deal with the FDLR. So the matter is not being ignored, but it's being dealt with in that particular context. Whether the government of the Congo would have the capacity to disarm the FDLR now, as was written in that agreement between President Joseph Kabila and President Kagame, whether they have that capacity now, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. But I think that's the only way to deal with the problem of the FDLR. It must be on the basis of a condition of a peace agreement between the two countries. And then the two countries must act together to make sure that there's no security threat to Rwanda based on an armed group that is in the Congo, and vice versa. There must be no threat to the security of the DRC on the basis of some armed group that might be in Rwanda. I think that's the only way to deal with this issue. And fortunately, and hopefully, the agreement that's been signed in the US now would attend to that matter, hopefully, of the FDLR, the Rwandan refugees in the Congo. I'm talking about the Rwandan refugees because we've really never engaged the issue of Ugandan refugees in the Congo, because the problematic group was this FDLR. We've had a very, our relationship, I'm now talking as a liberation movement, our relationship with Iran starts after the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. The government of Iran at the time, of the Shah, had very good relations with the apartheid regime. When it was overthrown, that's when we started our own relations with Iran, which have continued ever since. At the time that the issue of the nuclear question as it relates to Iran, at that time that it arose very sharp and became a big issue, Security Council and all that, for some of that time, South Africa was the chair of the non-aligned movement. So we dealt with the government of Iran as the chair of the non-aligned movement. Because the positions that the non-aligned movement were taking was this, that the non-aligned movement is a very active supporter of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And therefore, the non-aligned movement would be opposed to any proliferation of nuclear weapons if it occurred in Iran. That's the position we took. And so we had very active engagement with the government of Iran on this matter. And the government of Iran continued to insist with us that there was actual policy that Iran must not have nuclear weapons. And therefore the accusation that was being made at the time, they consistently denied it, that there were no nuclear weapons in Iran. As I say, we worked with them very closely. At the time, I remember that there was a leading Iranian who became president of Iran, Mr. Rouhani. At the time that he was leading the negotiations on this issue, he came to us. We had a number of meetings with him. I'm saying later he became the president of Iran. During that time, maybe this is the first time I'm saying this, during this time, we are chair of the non-aligned movement. I then talked to the British Prime Minister and said, you know, Prime Minister, we are regularly in contact with the Iranians on this matter. And they assured us that there are no nuclear weapons. Can you give me one or two facts which show that in fact there is work being done in Iran towards the manufacture of nuclear weapons. Just a couple of facts, because then it would empower me as a chairperson of the non-aligned movement to confront the Iranians that you're not telling me the truth. So the British Prime Minister agreed. As a result, a delegation came from the British Intelligence Service, the MI6. They came here. So I met them. We raised the same issue with the government of Israel. And the delegation of Mossad came here, and we met them. We raised the same question with the US government, and the delegation of the CIA came, and they were met by the then Minister of Intelligence, Ronnie Castrins. And all of them, these intelligence agencies, they made their presentations. The reason our countries are saying Iran is busy with nuclear weapons are the following. In all instances, what our response was, what you are actually arguing is 1 + 1 is 5. There was nothing of substance that they had. It was deductions. If this and that, therefore the other. I'm saying that's why we say 1 + 1 = 5. I'm saying that was the actuality, and at that point of time, that it seemed to us that the government of Iran was quite being very truthful when they say there's no nuclear weapons. And indeed, these intelligence agencies, where they came to see us, could not give us information of an alternative kind. I do not know whether the situation in Iran with regard to nuclear weapons has changed. I'm saying during the time we're in government, historically, that was a position. I know the government of Iran continues to insist on that issue. Whether that's changed or not, I don't know. The issues of the involvement of MTN, for instance, in Iran, was entirely a matter between the company and Iran. The Iranians put out a tender for mobile telephony. MTN won that contract. I remember there was strong opposition. Another competitor there was a Turkish company. But that was entirely a commercial thing. I don't see the reason why the matter of the relations between South Africa and Iran should offend anybody. These are ordinary, normal bilateral relations between South Africa and Iran. There's nothing exceptional about them. And indeed, I don't know what the chief of the National Defense Force said when he was in Tehran recently. I'm sure that would not have created new policy towards Iran. So as I say, I don't know what it is that would be offensive to anybody, as a consequence of which there would be a confrontation between us and any other country about the issue of our relations with Iran. There's nothing exceptional about those relations. The U.S. historically, as everybody, students at the school know, the U.S. has had what has been called the Monroe Doctrine for centuries, which was that part of the world is the exclusive sphere of influence by the United States, Latin America, and so on. And I'm afraid, I think that attitude persists. And so when Cuban Revolution succeeded in 1959, Fidel Castro would say, when we took power in 1959, we were pink in our politics. We were pink, like the shirt I'm wearing. I think it's pink. And it says, what turned us red was the response of the United States towards Cuba. It was the attitude that the United States government took at that time, which was to say, in our sphere of influence in terms of the Monroe Doctrine, you cannot have policies of which the United States government disapproves. And therefore took certain actions against Cuba. I think you're having a similar phenomenon with regard to Venezuela. Because I wouldn't imagine that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. I think it's, I think you can't imagine that Venezuela becoming a threat to the U.S. such that the U.S. must destroy troops to come and attack Venezuela. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think it's probably influenced by this continuing doctrine that this part of the world is our sphere of influence, and therefore we will not allow that any government should pursue policies with which we disagree. I would hope that it's a matter that can be resolved, because the countries of Latin America, like the countries of Africa, really surely should be free to decide what their destiny is. But at attack or not, I really don't know. As I was trying to indicate earlier, our country, the rest of our continent, and I think everybody else, has got to find a way of intervening in the process of the formation of this new world order, in good measure influenced by what the Trump administration is doing. Our government has taken a position that I think is correct, to say we don't want a war, a fight with the Americans. We want to engage them, so that let us find a solution. For instance, answer the question, why these tariffs? Let's find a solution to that particular matter. I think the government has taken a position with regard to come to that. And I do hope the continuing engagement between our government and the United States will resolve this matter. We don't want, our government, I'm saying, has taken a correct position in saying we don't want a confrontation with the United States. But also correct for the government here to say, but we insist on our independence and our capacity as a country to determine for ourselves what is good for South Africa. It's also correct to insist on that. And hopefully the engagement, we continue engagement with the U.S. government about the tariffs and whatever else will produce the necessary outcome. The issue of African alignment, that's an agreed position of the African continent. SADC, I think, got something similar, very 30 years of democracy in South Africa. Yeah. There were many requests like this from the media, domestic, international, in various organizations. So I thought, no, I couldn't do these individual interviews. Rather, let me make one statement about this issue. South Africa in 30 years, and then answer questions after that. So I therefore addressed a public meeting and public address on the 30th of April last year about South Africa at 30. And having discussed everything about South Africa at 30, I then said, it seems to me that one of the things that needs to happen, because there are too many unanswered questions, it's not absence of knowledge of the problems. As our colleague, the president of the SRC, was saying, we know the problems of poverty and this and that and the other. The problem, though, is that as a country we have not been able to solve them, these problems.
Yeah.
Never mind our election manifestos. All of us we put out manifestos election time, this is what we're going to do. None of them has assisted us to solve the problem, this problem. So I said, I think it is time that we get the people of South Africa themselves, the ordinary people, to get together and answer these questions. What do they think? Not political parties or whatever, but the people themselves. Let them meet and say, give an example. Why don't we have a national dialogue? The participants, for instance, in the national dialogue would be the women of South Africa. That's one constituency. So what you do, you ask a Professor Puleng Lengabula here, who happens to be a woman, to say to Puleng, can you put together a delegation of 200 women, inclusive of the women of South Africa, who must then attend as a delegation to the national dialogue? Same with the youth, same with the traditional healers, same with many people, the arts world, the people of the faith organizations, and so on. So you have delegations of this kind, of the ordinary people. Not to complain that we're hungry, we know that. But to say, how do you solve this problem? That
Exactly, Mr. Mbeki.
not represented by
Exactly
their political
my
parties, but the
point.
people themselves. So I said, let's have
Exactly.
national dialogue. I then said in that same speech that this idea, this thing is, I'm saying this thing, but it's too big even for me. So I'm going to raise this same matter with the foundations and say to the foundations, this is what I think. Can you people take up this matter? So I requested a meeting with them. Lutuli Foundation, Mandela Foundation, Tutu Foundation, Biko Foundation, Sobukwe, Mbeki, all of them. And said, this is what I think, this is what I've said publicly. I think you people must take up this matter. Unfortunately, they agreed. So these are the people who then set about organizing for the national dialogue. Now, I don't know if Max Bokwana is still here. Is he here? Oh, you are here. No reason I'm mentioning Max is because the foundations constituted what became called a preparatory task team to organize a national dialogue. I've never been party to that committee. Max, who is the CEO of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, is a member of that committee. So I thought I would ask Max to come and complete an answer to this question, which was why did the foundations leave? And what is going to happen in the consequence of that? I think it's best that the preparatory task team answers that question. I'm not a member of the preparatory task team. Ever since the foundations agreed, Max, can you please come? Okay.
So this is Ishmael, and Ishmael has been the youth league of the preparatory task team, and then because you needed to say, possible most of our futures have already been destroyed, but we must not destroy the future of young people. It's in their interest that this must work. But let me do something so that everybody can understand very quickly. In explaining what happened, in the course after the head of state had announced the date of the 15th of August, we were taken to court by one of the leaders of the trade union movement and the political party. And the papers in the court were saying, we know all of you. There is nothing genuine about what you are doing. You want to use government and government money to prop up the misfortunes of the ANC. So there's nothing trustworthy about you. And then secondly, he says, I know how you comrades behave. You've got interesting methodologies of skimming money from government. One way of you going to skim this money, you're going to do what this union leader says, do self-created emergencies so that you can get money very quickly, but you don't have time, plan, and transparent process of how to spend that money. So you will spend that money within few days, and it gives you an opportunity to do all manner of wrong things about that money. And he says then the third thing is that we don't trust this process because this process is not citizen-led process. It's going to be a government-led process so that the government can deal with its own problems. So this accusation is put directly at us.
Yeah.
So we responded in detail and said, no, that's not correct. This process is exactly the way the president is talking about. we're saying our country is on its knees. There seems to be very lack of clarity where will this country will be tomorrow, politically and economically. And it looks like from the political parties we do not have the answers. So our view is that the people of South Africa are sovereign. And it's these people that must give the answer about this South Africa we want and this South Africa we don't want. We explained that this has nothing to do with helping the ANC. This has nothing to do with the abuse of government. So we write an affidavit. And secondly, we say these foundations will not touch money and this preparatory task team. If there's any money for any resources that are going to be used, they will be through NEDLEC that has got that such capacity. So there's not going to be any self-created emergencies as we are being accused. And as a result, the government is just going to be one of the participants. It's not going to be the drivers of the process. We write all of these things, and the head of state does the same thing, and ourselves at the foundations, we went to court. And as we went to court, we argued that there's nothing urgent about this. These allegations are not correct. And the court agreed with us and chased away that union leader. Here is the problem. 5 days after that, we were asked by some participants in the process to behave exactly the same way we were being accused. And our position as the foundations was that we can't walk away from the oath that we have taken. We can't begin to say we will solve South Africa's problems when we act on unprincipled basis. We can't solve South Africa's problems when we cause all of this chaos. So in the end, this is the work Ishmael and the team we have been doing for 13 months. They arrived 3 weeks before the 15th of August. A group of people say, we've got authority, we are ready, we're going to drive this process. 2 minutes. Yeah.
He wants to offload.
So,
Come on.
So when these new people say, no, we are ready to have a convention at UNISA in 8 days, we say, but you can't. And as we're speaking, one of them says, no, here's 28 million rand, it has just come into my phone. So we said, this is exactly what we're being accused of. We do not want to be close to a process like that. But more importantly, we had organized, we had looked at about 30 sectors. We were saying the engagement of the convention, it would be very different from a Lekgotla, it will be very different from an Imbizo, because one of the challenges this nation must face is this idea of anti-intellectual. And this acceptance that our nation must be directed largely on semi-illiterate basis. So what we thought we should do is to identify 10, 12 pain points, SRC President, and put together some detailed work around these points, whether it's the economy, whether it's state of security, and whether it's foreign relations, Africa agenda. We put together all of this work. And we said, so we got some two economists that wrote a very complicated economics document. We said, no, we'll take two universities, University of the Western Cape and University of Johannesburg, to help us summarize these documents so that they become understandable. We had young people in the group that says, we will do fact sheets and then we will do infographics. So that you take these documents, complicated one, less complicated one, just figures, give it to the women, so that they meet on their own and discuss. Give it to the youth, they do the same thing, give it to the traditional leaders, all of the 30 groups. And from each one, having discussed all of these points, they will say, no, it's not 12 problems, it's 13, 14, 15. But this is our view. Then we constitute a convention. That convention is to begin the dialogue based on this information that has been put together. So our colleagues that says, let's rush, they say, don't worry about the documents. So don't worry about all of the discussions. We will meet at UNISA, we'll find out when we get there what we talk about. And we were saying we can't get involved in a process like that because, as the SRC president was saying, this process has got lots of people that are doubting it. There's lots of cynicism about it. So the way we present it, it must be inspiring and transformative and very different from what has been happening in Izimbizos and other structures. Now, when we could not agree on the approach, we asked one of the intellectuals to sit us down and say, how do we put this process together? We sat as the preparatory task team that has got other people that are beyond the foundations. So when we agree on the best approach, we said, no, it's 8 days before the 15th of August. You can't do a credible process. So let's put this thing for at least 2 months and do it in such a way that South Africans see something new, not see chaos. And we agreed to put together that proposal and send it to the head of state so that together we can postpone this and do all of the preparatory work. The day we're supposed to go to the head of state, we were then told by some of our colleagues that they don't remember what we were talking about yesterday. So this thing must proceed. It's at that point then that we had to tell the head of state, says, the whole thing is not legally credible. So we shouldn't mislead the nation. The preparations are hopelessly underwhelming. We're not going to be able to produce the necessary agenda. We're not showing the necessary seriousness in this process. And at that point we say, but those that say they are ready, they can go ahead. But as the foundation, we've got a responsibility to protect the credibility and the legitimacy of this process. Why? Because it is just too important. It may be the only thing that saved this country from abyss. So we cannot allow it to be done in any other way by people sometimes where you think their objective is actually to collapse it. So whatever happened at UNISA happened. And we do not want to be harping on that. What we are saying, we're meeting the eminent persons group that had been put together by the head of state and say to them, let's put our heads together. How then do we start building confidence again in this process? It's a very heavy job, Professor Antony, because you are dealing with a process that was facing cynicism already. We have seemed to have plunged it in another difficulty. But this is one thing we're not going to give in. We are working to develop that confidence building process. There's quite a lot of work that Ishmael and the team are working on. But in the end, we will have to regroup the way we had designed. We are not prepared to allow this process to fail. So we will actually look for support from the people that are in the room. But I'm quite happy to engage in this process beyond this. This was for the students, not for us. But thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. President, I just want to thank you for making the call for a national dialogue. Who would have thought that the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Tutu Foundation, and many others, the Steve Biko Foundation, would be standing united in resolve? Because as Max said, this process is too important to fail. The youth of South Africa deserve a national dialogue whereby they have the chance to co-create solutions by their own African hands for the future. And I want to be a bit bolder than you, Max. Let us make no mistake about it. The national dialogue has been hijacked. Let me be clear. It's been hijacked. And it is our duty now as the citizens of South Africa to reclaim this national dialogue by whatever means necessary. We must also be wary of the fact that there are, as Max said, those who want to collapse the national dialogue. And we will not give them the opportunity to do that. This is why we are now engaging with the eminent persons. But thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thanks, colleague. So that's the answer to the question that was posed. There was another question that was posed, which was about what the university is doing with regard to people with disabilities.
Okay, listen, guys. You know, one of the things that I think we've all seen what was happening, guys. You know, where there is money, guys, I can tell you right now, where there is money, people are just going ballistic. People, they just get greedy, man. They just want to take things and You know, the way he's explaining it, the way he was explaining that thing, it was planned very well. Very well. The way they did it, the way they wanted to do it, it was so amazing. You know? And I'm happy because Mr. Thabo Mbeki actually, you know, made it clear to say, let this guy come and explain. Because those are the guys that were involved in there. And it's a good thing that he actually did. Now we know what happened. You know? How we've always known, you know, the chaos that was there, the way things were rushed and everything. Now people receiving 8 million, and then what are you doing, guys? Hi, South Africa, yeah, no. You know, I'm very sorry, guys, but hey, Mr. President, Mr. Ramaphosa, I say, I really don't know what is wrong with Mr. As I thought this guy was like a leader, like, you know, like, I know. You know, if you can't even make people to work together, like Pella, according to me, they failed in terms of, now you want to organize, you want to hijack something, right? That includes people, but you are still rejecting or pushing out some people. I don't understand. I was under the impression that Mr. President, which is Mr. Ramaphosa, was supposed to control this thing. Don't push the other guys out. If they, for the fact that they decided to come out, you can say it's their choice, but the fact is, it was not your idea, Mr. President. It was never your idea, okay? They should have let this guy run this thing. They can just be there somewhere. As Mr. Mbeki said, it was not about parties. It was not about ANC here. It was not about any other political party. People had to be, like, from the beginning until the end. It has to be people. People, they just saw an opportunity to, hey, Mara guys, people are so greedy, eh? They just don't get enough, eh? But anyway, it's fine. If people want to live their lives like that, it's cool. You know, I hope they come together again. I hope they work this thing out, and then we have that dialogue thing. You know, who knows? Maybe, I don't know, but I'm not holding my breath. You know, with the way things have been, yes, it's like there are people who are just sitting there waiting. Any person who tries to do anything good, they just want to shut it down. That's what I'm thinking. I told you guys in my other video, there are people out there, right? There are people out there who want to do things right, who want to follow the process, do things right, run away from corruption, avoid corruption and everything. But then you've got other people who are just somewhere. They just come up, and just mess up things. If you come as a person who says, I want to change things, I want to do whatever, I can tell you the opposition is not going to be somebody from outside. It's going to be the one that is next to you. It's just funny. And it's so hilarious sometimes. It's not funny for our country. But sometimes when you see these type of things, you only see them in the movies. Now when you see them in your country, it's just amazing. You know? Thank you guys for watching. Like the video, subscribe. Have a good day. I'm out.